Rules exist to protect the living.
He died waiting for your rules.
She was already waiting by the gate when the sirens blared behind me, heels planted on polished concrete, clipboard angled like a weapon. Claudia Mercer didn't flinch. The board chair never did. "Access denied," she said, voice crisp enough to slice through panic. I shouted that my son was inside, barely breathing. She glanced at the red light strobing against the metal bars and replied, almost bored, "Emergency vehicles require prior clearance. You know the policy." That was the moment I realized control was her oxygen. The enforcer in crimson stood there, immaculate suit catching the afternoon sun, blocking the one thing that could have saved him. My palms slammed the keypad until blood dotted the numbers. Nothing. The system didn't care. Neither did she. She turned slightly, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Rules are rules, Mr. Donovan. We can't make exceptions." I met her eyes, unblinking, pale, shark-like. And for a second, I almost believed her. Almost. Then I remembered who built this system. "The firmware you're hiding behind," I said, voice shaking but low, "was written by me." Her jaw twitched, a small victory, microscopic but real. If you've ever watched Power Crush Mercy, hit subscribe right now. This isn't about rules. It's about the moment justice finally wakes up. That was my only pause before the storm. I was Lieutenant Mark Donovan, U.S. Navy SEAL, EOD Unit 415. I'd seen chaos before, but never this close to home. Not until that gate, not until her. The clipboard queen tilted her head, pretending concern. "We'll review the incident afterward," she said. Afterward, as if life were a form to be filed. The paramedic screamed from the road. I screamed louder, but bureaucracy had a password, and compassion didn't. The iron bars hummed, sensors blinking green to no one. My voice cracked on his name. That gate was supposed to keep us safe. It kept my son trapped instead. Sunlight glared off the Silver Pines Estates plaque. The system I built had become my cage, and behind it, a 7-year-old boy gasped for air. When the ambulance finally forced entry, it was too late. I didn't need a doctor to tell me. His small hand hung loose, wrist bent toward the place I'd been standing. The tyrant in heels stood a few feet away, already on the phone with the HOA's legal counsel. She didn't look at me once. The ink from her pen hadn't even dried from the violation notice she'd written that morning. Unauthorized modification, gate protocol overuse. I dropped to my knees on the pavement, the gravel biting through my uniform pants. And I made a promise. On a battlefield once, I'd promised never to leave anyone behind. That vow didn't end overseas. It began again here, beside a suburban gate dressed like progress. I thought battlefields took souls. Turns out, neighborhoods do it quieter. "You enforce death, Claudia." Her certainty cracked for the first time as she turned away, heels clicking like gunshots all the way to the hospital. They called it an unfortunate procedural delay. I called it murder in daylight. And I swore that every neighbor, every voter, every camera in this county would know the truth. Because this wasn't negligence. It was design. And I helped build it. I sat outside the trauma ward, staring at my reflection in the vending machine glass. My hands still shook. Not from shock, from restraint. Every part of me wanted to break something. Behind me, the nurses whispered. They'd seen it on the news already. "Ambulance delayed by HOA policy." Those words crawled across the bottom of the TV screen like a wound replaying itself. I clenched the edge of the bench. I'd defuse bombs with steadier hands than this. Tonight, it wasn't C4 that failed. It was trust. And at the center of it all stood Claudia Mercer. By morning, her memo called it a tragic accident, a protocol failure, never human error. I watched her choose procedure over a heartbeat, decisive to them, lethal to me. The next day, a white envelope waited on my door. Disruptive conduct and unauthorized entry attempt. My son's death, reduced to paperwork. That was her style. Punish the grief before it learned to speak. Neighbors avoided my driveway now. Fear had a quiet way of building fences higher than wood ever could. But one didn't. A woman I'd seen before at meetings, Linda Hayes, left a casserole and a note. We saw what she did. You're not alone. It wasn't much, but it was the first human thing that week. The clipboard queen wasn't finished. By Friday, she'd called an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, just acknowledged. I showed up anyway. The HOA office sat inside a converted model home. Beige walls, fake succulents, everything sterile. She stood near the podium, crimson blazer sharp against the room's dullness, flanked by her board like sentries. Her expression didn't falter when she saw me. "Mr. Donovan," she began, voice sweet enough to rot. "You're not on the agenda." "Neither was my son's funeral," I said. The air thinned. Someone dropped a pen. The tyrant in heels sighed like a teacher with a slow student. "We're all grieving in our own way," she replied, "but emotional outbursts won't bring closure." Closure? That's what she called it. Not justice, not truth. I stepped forward. "That gate system malfunctioned because of the board's override policy. You denied an ambulance while a child—" Her tone sliced through me. "Allegedly." That word echoed like a slap. Allegedly. The coward's shield. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket. "That's your system's log data," I said. "Every access attempt, every denial, every override command. Guess whose credentials appear 3 times at 7:04 p.m.? She blinked, once, controlled, then smiled. "The officer of rules never broke character for long. Mr. Donovan, hacking into private HOA systems is a serious offense." "I didn't hack it," I said quietly. "I wrote it." Murmurs filled the room. One board member looked away. Another scribbled something nervously, but she didn't flinch. She adjusted her pearl earring and said, "Then you'll understand why tampering is grounds for immediate suspension of your residency privileges." It was a chess move. Cold, legal, lethal. She was threatening to expel me from my own home. I stared at her, memorizing the face of every calm decision that killed my son. "You're not protecting the community," I said. "You're protecting your power." "Call it what you want," she said, smiling for the minutes. "The law's on my side." Her belief in that law was her first mistake. When I left that meeting, a man caught up to me in the parking lot. Officer Henry Cole, county fire inspector, nervous, eyes darting. "Mr. Donovan," he whispered, "I was the one who signed the clearance delay. She said it was protocol. I cut him off. "You knew a child was waiting." He swallowed. "You don't understand what she does to people who cross her." That was when I realized something deeper. Fear wasn't her weapon. It was her infrastructure. "If you've ever seen someone hide behind laws to bury guilt," I said to the camera later that night, "you know how this story starts, but not how it ends." I looked out at the street, at the same gate still standing like nothing happened, and in that silence, I made my next decision. Not as a father, but as a soldier. The next battle wasn't about grief. It was about exposure. By dawn, the neighborhood had gone quiet again. That stage kind of silence Claudia Mercer called peaceful compliance. She called it harmony. I called it evidence. The board chair had sent another statement to the residents overnight. The words were as polished as her heels. "We extend our sympathy to the Donovan family during this unfortunate time. Please remember that gossip damages community unity." It wasn't sympathy. It was silencing, disguised as order. I knew I couldn't confront her again. Not yet. I needed allies, or at least witnesses who remembered what fear sounded like. That's when I saw Officer Henry Cole at the far end of the cul-de-sac. He stood beside his city-issued SUV, clipboard in hand, pretending to inspect a fire hydrant that didn't need inspecting. His uniform looked too heavy for the heat. His jaw clenched when he saw me coming. "Morning," I said. He nodded once, eyes avoiding mine. "Just routine follow-up." "The same kind of routine that kept my son from breathing?" I asked. The clipboard trembled slightly in his hand. He looked around. 3 houses away, a curtain shifted. People were watching. They always watched when the enforcer in crimson and wasn't there to narrate for them. "Mark," he said quietly, "you don't want to do this out here." "Out here's where she killed him," I replied. The clipboard queen had turned even men like him into ghosts, visible, functional, but voiceless. We stopped in my driveway, where the night still reeked of memory. Henry rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the gate like it could hear him. "She said it was policy," he murmured, said the system had to stay locked until the board confirmed the emergency code. I stared at him. "You're the confirmation." He didn't answer. The silence was enough. "Henry," I said, voice lower now, She's using your badge to hide her crimes. He looked up at me then, eyes bloodshot, haunted. You don't get it, Mark. She ruins anyone who crosses her. His cage wasn't metal. It was paperwork and fear. The tyrant in heels knew exactly how to build those. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Then let's make her paperwork public. He shook his head, stepping back. I can't. Not yet. But the tremor in his voice said otherwise. That night, an unmarked envelope waited under my door. Manual override requires 2 authorizations. Mercer used 1. I knew Henry's handwriting. He was trying to help without helping, so I followed the paper trail to the county's emergency systems division. 2 requested the access logs. 27 manual gate locks traced to the same IP, hers, suspicious. She'd labeled life itself as a threat. That night, I stood at my window, staring at the glowing gates she'd turned into monuments of control. Somewhere beyond those lights, Henry was probably sitting in his car, debating whether to come clean or vanish like the others she'd silenced. The next morning, I didn't have to wait long for her move. A black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Claudia Mercer herself, the enforcer in crimson, sunglasses hiding the lack of conscience. She smiled like the devil had sent her an invitation. "Mr. Donovan," she said, voice smooth as marble, "I understand you've been speaking to county offices without board authorization." "Funny," I replied. "Didn't realize grief needed permission." She stepped closer, perfume heavy, precise. "You're angry, I understand, but pursuing false narratives only damages your reputation. You've lost enough already." The words hit harder than she knew. "Don't," I said quietly. Her smile widened. "You were a soldier, weren't you? You should know how to follow orders." That line, so calm, so calculated, burned into my skull. She wasn't warning me, she was taunting me. I leaned forward, close enough to see her reflection in my window. "You ever stand in a combat zone, Claudia? You think rules keep you safe there?" She laughed softly. "Rules are why I sleep at night." "Then maybe you should stop sleeping." For a moment, neither of us moved. The neighborhood was silent again, except for the faint hum of the gate behind her, my son's grave marker made of steel. She adjusted her blazer and turned away, voice floating over her shoulder. "See you at the board review, Mr. Donovan. Do be civil." When she left, the air felt heavier, but under the anger was something colder. Purpose. Her arrogance and Henry's fear were finally intersecting. If you've ever seen the moment before justice catches its breath, you know what that stillness feels like. That's where I was standing, between mourning and war. The morning she called the emergency audit began like every other in Silver Pines. Order on the surface, fear beneath it, but something in the air felt charged, like the seconds before a storm. I didn't need the HOA newsletter to know who caused it. Claudia Mercer was on the move again. The board chair had announced that every homeowner would face an immediate compliance inspection to ensure community integrity following recent disruptions. Her phrasing was legal and rehearsed, but I'd learned to read her tone the way soldiers read wind direction. It wasn't an inspection, it was a purge. By 8 a.m., white vans rolled through the cul-de-sac. HOA inspectors in matching polos carried clipboards stamped with the same initials that haunted my nightmares. CM. The enforcer in crimson didn't bother hiding her control anymore. She flaunted it. I stood on my porch, coffee untouched, as she walked toward me. Her heels clicked against the pavement with that same perfect rhythm, like a metronome counting down to confrontation. "Good morning, Mr. Donovan," she said, voice smooth and brittle. "Routine check. Shouldn't take long." "Nothing's routine with you," I replied. The clipboard queen smiled, that polite, venomous curve of the lips. "We're ensuring no unauthorized modifications to community security infrastructure." That word again. Gates. It wasn't oversight. It was a reminder. Behind her, inspectors scanned my property with tablets. Inspection that felt more like surveillance. "You're investigating the system you broke." "Correction," she said softly. "For those who disrupt order." The officer of rules didn't blink. The sunlight caught her crimson blazer, flaring so bright it almost masked the chill beneath her words. My fist tightened. "You mean those who ask questions?" "Questions cause chaos," she replied, "and chaos destroys communities." You destroyed mine. The words came out sharper than I meant. She tilted her head, examining me like a specimen pinned under glass. I didn't destroy anything, Mr. Donovan. Tragedy did, and tragedy doesn't need permission. I could have broken then, shouted, cursed, demanded justice. But something stopped me. Her confidence wasn't arrogance anymore. It was desperation in disguise. The clipboard queen wasn't fighting me. She was covering tracks. Then Henry appeared at the end of the driveway, her smile tightening for a moment before the mask returned. "Officer Cole," she called, her tone slicing the air. "Be sure to verify that the fire access code remains restricted." Henry nodded, avoiding my eyes. I could see the guilt eating through him. His hands trembled so slightly only someone trained to read fear would notice. When Claudia turned to direct another inspector, I stepped toward him. "You gave her the override again?" He whispered. "She threatened to suspend my certification. Said the department's under review." I looked past him at her, the tyrant in heels orchestrating her dance of control. "She's not auditing the neighborhood," I said quietly. "She's deleting evidence." Henry's eyes flickered toward the van. "Then you'd better move fast." As if on cue, Claudia snapped her fingers, summoning one of her aides. "Wipe inspection files older than 30 days, she ordered. "Data retention limits per HOA privacy standards." That was it, her cover operation, disguised as compliance. I took out my phone, recording discreetly. Her reflection caught in the camera lens. Poised, perfect, poisonous. She turned back toward me, voice steady as ever. "You could make this easier with a public apology," she said. "For what?" "For inciting division and defying structure." She smirked. "Belief isn't necessary when you have proof." That's when she gestured toward her aide, and I saw him holding a printed image, a photo of me, standing outside the HOA office days earlier, mid-argument. The caption read, "Aggressive resident interferes with safety review." She'd been building a narrative. Every move I made, every word, twisted into a weapon. I met her gaze. "You're trying to bury the truth before it surfaces." "Truth," she said, stepping closer, "is whatever the record says it is. The record's about to change." Something flickered in her eyes, a shadow of unease, quickly smothered. "You think you scare me, Mr. Donovan?" "No," I said, pocketing my phone. "But you should be scared of your own reflection when the lights turn on." She turned sharply, signaling her team. "Wrap it up," she ordered. "This property's under review for non-compliance." Henry exhaled shakily. "She's spiraling," he whispered. "No," I said. "She's preparing for war. Because people like Claudia Mercer don't crumble when they lose control. They detonate. And I was done playing defense." By sunrise, the entire subdivision pulsed with unease. It wasn't noise you could hear. It was the quiet kind, the type that spreads under doors and inside phones. Something had shifted overnight, and everyone could feel it. The official HOA feed was locked behind password protection, but fragments of a new memo were already circulating in private chats. Claudia Mercer was initiating resident conduct, investigations. The board chair didn't sleep, she schemed. By 9 a.m., every mailbox carried a printed envelope stamped "Notice of Behavioral Review." No violations listed, just a summons. Residents called it the silent blacklist. No one dared to ask who wrote their names, but I already knew. The enforcer in crimson never needed evidence to punish, only attention to fuel her control. I found Henry Cole sitting in his SUV at the edge of the cul-de-sac, engine off, eyes hollow. He looked like a man staring into his own failure. I leaned through the open window. "She's tightening the noose," I said. He didn't look at me. "You think I don't know? She called the station last night. Said I was compromised. My supervisor's investigating me for procedural breach." The clipboard queen had officially turned her threats into action. "Then she's scared," I said. He laughed bitterly. "You don't get it, Mark. Fear doesn't weaken her, it fuels her." The air between us hummed with unspoken truth. She'd drawn her line in red, and anyone who crossed it would bleed reputation before justice. I glanced toward her house at the end of the street. The tyrant in heels had upgraded her fortress overnight. New cameras, new security lights, and a black SUV with tinted windows idling in the driveway. She wanted everyone to see her power, even when she wasn't inside it. Inside my own home, I began to connect dots. files, timestamps, deleted inspection reports, all trails leading to the same server, the same user tag, C, Mercer, odd admin. She wasn't just chairing the board. She was running a private surveillance operation under the HOA network. Her mistake? She forgot I built those systems before she weaponized them. I logged into the county maintenance portal, not to hack, just to observe. The data was encrypted, but the access logs still showed something. Dozens of manual overrides submitted from the same device within seconds of each other. That wasn't an algorithm. That was panic. Then came the email. From HOA Security Enforcement. Subject: cease and desist, unauthorized data access. Body: your actions constitute digital trespassing. Any further interference will be reported to state authorities. Claudia Mercer, board chair. She knew? The officer of rules had just declared digital war. I picked up the phone and called Henry. She's on to me. She's monitoring my network. He hesitated. You should walk away while you can. I can't, I said. Not until the truth's public. There was silence, then a whisper. She's got leverage, Mark. I heard her on a call with a county liaison. Said she's submitting misconduct evidence against you to revoke your clearance. So that was her next play. Discredit the soldier before he could become a whistleblower. That afternoon, I drove past the HOA office, the same converted model home that had become her. Command center. Through the tinted glass, I saw her silhouette. The enforcer in crimson pacing, tablet in hand, orchestrating control like a symphony. Every flick of her wrist sent someone else scrambling. Then, a stroke of luck. A flash of movement near the window. Linda Hayes, the neighbor who'd left the casserole weeks ago, carrying a folder toward the copier. She hesitated before glancing out, spotting me. Her expression wavered between fear and resolve. I mouthed one word: help. She froze, then lowered her eyes, but not before slipping one paper under the copier tray instead of scanning it. I knew that motion. I'd seen field agents do it when they wanted something found. When she left, I parked and walked inside. The receptionist barely looked up. I walked past the hallway until I reached the copier, and there it was, left behind exactly where she'd placed it. A single HOA internal memo titled Incident Liability Management. Halfway down the page, a sentence stood out. All external communications regarding the Donovan child's death must redirect to the board chair's office for narrative alignment. Narrative alignment. She was rewriting tragedy into policy. Before I could fold the page, a voice froze me. Taking office materials, Mr. Donovan? I turned. There she was, the clipboard queen herself, standing at the door, smile like glass under sunlight. Old habits, I said. Her heels clicked closer. You're very brave, she said softly, or very foolish. Do you know what happens to people who twist grief into vendettas? I'm learning, I replied. She leaned in, her perfume cutting through the air. Then here's your lesson. Grief fades, consequences don't. For a moment, we were inches apart. Soldier and bureaucrat, truth and reputation, predator and prey. Then she smiled wider. You'll understand soon enough. The next board session will be illuminating. When she left, I finally exhaled. My pulse steadied, but the message was clear. She wasn't bluffing anymore. The tyrant in heels was preparing her biggest spectacle yet, and I'd be ready to turn her stage into evidence. By the time dawn touched the rooftops, Silver Pines had turned into a ghost town, wrapped in perfection. Every curtain was drawn, every driveway immaculate. The kind of silence that isn't peace, but fear dressed as order. The neighborhood's pulse no longer belonged to the people who lived here. It beat in rhythm with Claudia Mercer's heels. The board chair had released a new mandate overnight. All communications between residents and external agencies are to be routed through HOA oversight. Translation? She'd cut off everyone's access to the outside world. No calls to reporters, no complaints to the county, no truth escaping the gates. The enforcer in crimson had sealed her kingdom. Henry Cole called just before sunrise, his voice trembling. She's not just locking residents out, he said. She's locking law enforcement out too. Every time we request records, they redirect to her security department. Run a trace, I said. I already did. Her server logs route through a private cloud registered under her daughter's company name. She's laundering data through a shell firm. I gripped the phone tighter. The clipboard queen wasn't just corrupt, she was sophisticated. She's trying to bury the death entirely, Henry continued. There's a file labeled Incident D49. It's sealed under board privilege. That's your son's case. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Can you access it? Not without authorization from 2 board members, he said. But if you get one signature, I can override the second. There was only one person on that board who might still have a conscience, Linda Hayes. By mid-morning, I was at her door. She answered like she'd been expecting me, eyes red, voice low. She knows I helped you, Linda whispered. My husband's business just lost its HOA maintenance contract. She's punishing everyone who speaks to you. She's beyond punishing, I said. She's covering a homicide. Linda's lips trembled. I saw her that night, Mark. She was there before the paramedics. She said the gate code failed, but the control pad was flashing green. That detail, the color code, meant the system wasn't malfunctioning. It had been manually overridden. I stepped closer. Linda, I need your digital authorization. If I can pair it with Henry's credentials, we can unseal that file. Her hands shook as she reached for her tablet. If she finds out, she already knows, I said. But she won't win. Linda hesitated for what felt like forever before signing the access link. She'll come for me, she whispered, not if we move first. By noon, I was back at the precinct with Henry. We used a secure workstation, bypassing the HOA's front-end firewall. The progress bar crawled across the screen, 1%, 2%, 3%, until finally a folder appeared, Incident D49. Inside, the truth bled through every timestamp. Gate override, Claudia Mercer, Zurich, admin. Duration, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Access request, block entry, unauthorized emergency vehicle. She hadn't just delayed the ambulance, she'd stopped it. Henry's voice broke the silence. She caused the delay that killed him. I nodded slowly, rage and clarity intertwining into something colder. Then, we make sure everyone sees it. But before we could export the file, the system froze. The officer of rules was already one step ahead, remote lockdown. On the monitor, a new message appeared. Unauthorized access detected. This action will be reported to the board chair. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no voice, just the faint click of breathing. Then her voice, calm, composed, venomous. Mr. Donovan, Claudia Mercer said, I hope you understand the difference between grief and obsession. One can be forgiven, the other cannot. You killed my son, I said. I enforced policy, she replied softly. The system failed because you tampered with it. You should really be more careful about what you access. It wasn't a threat, it was a setup. Henry muted the call, typing furiously. She's deleting the log trail. I can isolate one backup copy if we act now. Do it, I said. We rerouted the data through the county archive relay, sending a single compressed file to an off-site journalist, contact I'd worked with before deployment. When the upload hit 100%, I exhaled. Done. But Henry didn't look relieved. He turned the monitor toward me. The system clock blinked midnight. The clipboard queen had already filed a misconduct complaint against me in the same minute the file uploaded. Her timing was surgical. She wants to make this look like retaliation, he said. The tyrant in heels knew how to weaponize perception as precisely as she weaponized fear. That evening, her statement went live on the HOA's site. Recent cyber interference attempts threaten the stability of our neighborhood systems. We urge all residents to remain vigilant and report any suspicious behavior from non-compliant individuals. Beneath it, my name, my photo, my address. The officer of rules had officially branded me the enemy. That night, headlights crawled slowly past my house. Neighbors I'd helped fix fences for now looked away when I waved. Fear does that. It doesn't need to be true, just repeat it enough times. But fear also cracks when light hits it, and the light was already spreading. Because that journalist, she'd replied with one line, got the file, working it tonight. The war had officially left Claudia's control, and for the first time since my son's last breath, I felt her empire start to shake. The board chair's official memo hit inboxes at 6:02 a.m. All residents are reminded that unauthorized communication with external media constitutes a breach of the Community Confidentiality Clause. Violators will face immediate penalties, including suspension of property privileges. That meant one thing: she knew about the leak. Henry arrived at my door 20 minutes later, pale and sweating. "She's losing control," he said. "The governor's office called the sheriff's department. They're verifying the incident log." "She'll try to rewrite it before they get there," I replied. "She already is," he muttered, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "This is what's left. I extracted fragments from her cloud before it went dark." I stared at the drive, the weight of proof compressed into plastic and silence. "What's on it?" "Every override she executed that night, including the manual gate block." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Again, an unknown number, but I didn't need to guess. The enforcer in crimson didn't waste time. "Mr. Donovan," Claudia Mercer began, her tone polished to authority, "I'd advise you to surrender any stolen data before this escalates." "You mean, before the truth surfaces?" Her laugh was soft, dismissive. "You've misunderstood something fundamental. In this community, perception is truth." I stepped outside, eyes scanning the cul-de-sac where her SUV idled at the corner. "Then, let's change the perception." For the first time, her voice faltered, only slightly, but enough. "Careful, Mark. You're one accusation away from losing everything you have left." "You already took everything I had," I said. The line went dead. Henry exhaled shakily. "She's setting up something big, maybe a counterattack." That afternoon, Linda Hayes showed up at my doorstep, hood up, eyes darting. "She knows I signed the authorization," she whispered. "She froze our HOA account. We can't access our insurance, our maintenance requests, nothing." The clipboard queen was gutting anyone who defied her. Linda handed me an envelope. "This arrived at my house last night. It's addressed to you." Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words written in red ink. "You don't know what I buried." It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. "Buried?" Henry muttered, reading over my shoulder. "What does she mean?" "She's talking about evidence," I said. "Something physical, something she couldn't delete." We pieced through old reports, timestamps, and maintenance schedules until we found it. A notation from 2 weeks before the incident. "Ground repair, Lot 14A, North Garden, restricted access." That was her property. "She buried the old control module," I said quietly. "The one she used to override the gates." Henry nodded. "Then we dig." We moved under the cover of midnight fog. Henry disabled the outer motion sensor while I slipped toward the north garden. The earth still bore the signs of a recent patch, soil too fresh, mulch too evenly spread. I dug quietly, hands numb against the cold dirt, until metal scraped against metal. There it was, the control module, compact and corroded but unmistakable. The access port still sealed with her initials, CM. Before I could bag it, a light flared behind me. "Step away from that soil." Her voice, calm, sharp, unmistakable. I turned slowly. Claudia Mercer stood there, crimson robe glowing under the garden lights, expression carved from fury and poise. "You think this makes you a hero?" she said. "It makes me a witness." She stepped closer, heels crunching the gravel. "You're desecrating private property. You buried a murder weapon." Her laugh cut the air. "You call it a weapon. I call it maintenance. You really think anyone will believe your word over mine?" I pointed to my chest. "They don't have to. I've been recording since I got here." For the first time, the officer of rules froze. Her eyes flickered toward the camera light, blinking faintly on my vest. "You're bluffing." I hit playback. Her own voice echoed back through the night. "You really think anyone will believe your word over mine?" The sound of her arrogance immortalized. "I don't care who you know," I said. "I know what you did." Behind her, the sound of tires crunching gravel drew her attention. 2 sheriff cruisers pulling into the drive. Henry had called them the second I hit record. She turned, panic flashing behind her mask. "You brought them here?" "No," I said. "You did. Every time you opened your mouth." The deputies stepped forward, flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Ma'am, we have a warrant to search this property," one of them said. Her eyes met mine, fury, disbelief, and the faintest tremor of fear. "This isn't over," she whispered. "I know," I replied. "It's just beginning." As they escorted her toward the porch, the red light from her garden cameras blinked out one by one, her empire collapsing in silence. The clipboard queen had finally lost control of the narrative, but as she vanished inside the flashing blue and red lights, I knew this wasn't victory. Not yet. Because when people like Claudia Mercer fall, they don't break. They plot. The next morning, Silver Pines felt like a crime scene disguised as suburbia. Patrol cars lined the street outside Claudia Mercer's mansion, the HOA flag that once waved proudly from her porch now hanging limp and torn. The enforcer in crimson had been escorted out in handcuffs only hours ago, yet somehow her shadow still stretched across every driveway. Because people like her didn't just vanish. They lingered in the cracks of control they'd created. The county deputies spent the morning digging through her private archives. What they found didn't surprise me. Multiple routers linked to off-grid servers, encrypted with homeowner IDs, gate timestamps, and something called Resident Risk Index. The clipboard queen had been raiding her neighbors like threats in a battlefield. Henry arrived mid-morning, holding a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the module we'd dug up. "They confirmed it," he said quietly. "Manual override, her signatures embedded in the firmware." I nodded. "That's our nail." But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't over. The tyrant in heels had built an empire on psychological control, not paperwork. She didn't need to be present to remain powerful. Her influence was coded into fear itself. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A private number. I answered, expecting silence. Instead, a voice. Low, strained, trembling. "Mr. Donovan, it's Linda." Her whisper barely held together. "She's calling people from lockup. She said the neighborhood isn't safe without her. She told the treasurer to reinstate her proxy privileges." My gut tightened. "She's still running the HOA from jail?" "Worse," Linda said. "She's threatening to release residents' financial data if they don't comply. Everyone's terrified." I looked toward the rows of pastel homes, blinds twitching, doors bolted, cameras still blinking red. Even in custody, the officer of rules ruled through panic. "She can't access those systems without her admin credentials," I said. Linda hesitated. "What if she already planned for that?" Henry's eyes widened. "Failsafe account, a ghost admin." I didn't need him to explain. A shadow profile that activates the moment the original account's privileges are revoked. The clipboard queen had given herself immortality. I drove straight to the HOA office, the temporary one set up inside the community center. Inside, residents whispered around coffee tables while county techs worked to scrub her data from the servers. On the wall, someone had torn down her frame portrait, but her nameplate still sat on the desk. Claudia Mercer, President, Silver Pines, HOA. The irony burned. Henry plugged his laptop into the console. "We can trace her shadow account if we know the trigger." "Check the timestamps around her arrest," I said. She wouldn't have waited. He typed furiously, lines of code scrolling across the screen. Then, a ping. There, a login from 3 minutes after she was booked. Username, Crimson Exec. I leaned closer. "That's her." Henry's hands shook. "She's deleting live logs. She's remotely wiping homeowner data. She's covering her tracks for good." I grabbed the radio from the counter. "This is Sheriff Donovan to County IT. Cut network power to Silver Pines grid immediately." The line crackled, then went dead. Lights flickered. Computers froze. The hum of servers fell silent. For the first time in months, the HOA's digital heartbeat stopped. But then, a single monitor rebooted. A message filled the screen in bright red. "Control is never lost, only redistributed." Henry stared at it, horrified. "She's taunting us. That's her." I read the next line as it typed itself onto the screen, letter by letter. "You think you ended me. You only validated me." A chill crawled down my spine. Even behind bars, the tyrant in heels still had reach. That night, the county issued a formal statement to the media. Former HOA President Claudia Mercer remains under investigation for obstruction, unauthorized surveillance, and negligent interference with emergency response. It sounded like closure, but I'd learned better. Closure isn't silence, it's the moment when the noise finally makes sense. I drove past her house one last time. The windows were boarded, the once manicured hedges left to overgrow. Yet something about it still felt alive. Like the house itself was waiting for her return. Then my phone lit up again, a text from an unknown number. "You really think prison walls stop Wi-Fi?" The clipboard queen's message burned across the screen, signed with one word, Crimson. My hand tightened around the phone. She wasn't threatening violence this time. She was threatening permanence. She wanted me to know that the systems she built weren't hers anymore. They belonged to the next one willing to use them. I stood there under the buzzing streetlight, wind biting at the back of my neck. For the first time, I understood the scale of what she'd created. A network that didn't need a person to operate, just fear to fuel it. The officer of rules hadn't lost control. She'd evolved beyond it. And if I didn't dismantle the machine she left behind, every HOA in the state could become another Silver Pines. Henry said behind me, "We shut her down once." I looked at the dark sky. "Then we'll do it again." The sun hadn't even set, but Silver Pines was already boiling under the surface. Every resident stood divided between silence and suspicion. Exactly how Claudia Mercer liked it. The board chair might have lost her legal footing, but she still owned perception. And in a place built on manicured illusions, that was enough to stay dangerous. By late afternoon, the HOA issued another bulletin under her name. Community Emergency Meeting. Attendance mandatory. Discussion, restoration of order. The irony burned. The woman who fractured everything was now summoning the victims to heal her reputation. Henry looked up from his monitor. "She's calling it inside the clubhouse," he said. "Press excluded, cameras banned. Classic containment move." "Good," I replied. "Let her think she's still in control." I'd already sent the backup files, the uncut footage from her garden confrontation, complete with her voice admitting to private property maintenance. My contact at the state investigator's office promised a full review within 48 hours. But Claudia Mercer didn't have 48 hours left, not before her empire collapsed from within. At dusk, the crowd assembled. Rows of folding chairs, restless whispers, the hum of tension so thick you could taste it. The enforcer in crimson stood before the podium, posture perfect, hair gleaming under the overhead lights like she was giving a victory speech, not facing exposure. "Residents of Silver Pines," she began, her voice steady, calm, too calm. "We've all endured misinformation, emotional manipulation, and law enforcement overreach. But tonight, we reclaim what this community stands for. Unity and order." The clipboard queen turned her eyes directly toward me, standing in the back. "Mr. Donovan has misrepresented facts, trespassed on private property, and interfered with HOA systems, all under the guise of grief. His allegations are not only false, they're criminal." I felt dozens of eyes burning into me. She was playing to their fear again, the same tactic she'd used when she took their control away and sold it back as safety. I stepped forward, voice even. "Tell them about the gate override, Claudia." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. The tyrant in heels blinked, one heartbeat of hesitation, before recovering her smirk. "You mean the fabricated file you sent to the media? Yes, I've seen your handiwork. It's impressive, really. You've taken your son's tragedy and turned it into theater." That line hit like a knife, but anger wasn't my weapon anymore. Truth was. I raised my phone. "If this is theater, then let's give the audience a show." The speakers crackled as I synced the playback, her voice from that night, calm and deliberate. "Block entry, unauthorized emergency vehicle." The room froze. Someone gasped. A few stood up. Claudia Mercer's composure fractured. "That's doctored," she said sharply, but her tone lacked conviction. Those words could belong to anyone. Henry stepped in from the back, laptop open, projection glowing across the wall. "Audio verified by county forensic techs," he announced. "Timestamp matches your user credentials. There's no edit trail." For the first time, panic rippled behind her eyes. She turned toward the crowd, desperate. "You don't understand. Those files were misinterpreted. I was told the gate malfunctioned." Linda Hayes' voice cut through the tension. "You told the system to malfunction, Claudia. I was there when you rewrote the command line." The room erupted. The officer of rules, the woman who ruled through silence, was being drowned out by voices, the very voices she'd spent years silencing. She tried one last pivot. "You're all being manipulated. This man, this soldier, is exploiting your fear. I stepped forward again. You used a community bylaw to justify a child's death. You don't get to talk about fear. The clipboard queen's hand trembled as she gripped the podium. For the first time, she wasn't the enforcer in crimson. She was just a woman, cornered by her own reflection. Reporters outside caught the chaos spilling into the courtyard. Word traveled fast. By the time officers entered through the back door, the crowd had already turned. Residents were shouting for her resignation, some demanding arrest, others crying, realizing what they'd lived under all this time. One of the deputies stepped beside me. "The governor's office confirmed it," he said quietly. "The override file is real. They're issuing an immediate suspension order." The tyrant in heels looked at me as they approached. "You think this makes you noble?" she hissed. "You think justice erases what you've lost?" I held her gaze. "No. Justice doesn't erase anything. It stops it from happening again." She turned as they led her out, chin high even in defeat, a queen without a throne, still pretending her crown was intact. Outside, the flash of cameras lit the night like lightning. The community that once bowed to Claudia Mercer now watched her crumble under the same spotlight she used to destroy others. But I knew this wasn't the end, not for her, not for me. Because some storms don't stop when the rain falls. They keep echoing until every secret is unearthed. By morning, Silver Pines was unrecognizable. The once pristine lawns now looked like abandoned battlegrounds. HOA signs pulled from the ground. Red violation slips shredded across the street like confetti of rebellion. Yet the silence that hung over the neighborhood wasn't peace. It was aftermath. The night before had shattered the illusion. The clipboard queen was gone, dragged from her podium in front of hundreds, her reputation bleeding out under flashing cameras. But even stripped of her crown, Claudia Mercer still had claws buried deep in the system she built. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with an encrypted alert from Henry. "Emergency. Meet me at the clubhouse. She left something behind." When I got there, the air smelled of burnt circuitry. The tech team was already prying open a locked terminal, one of the old security servers that powered the HOA's digital framework. Henry was pacing, jaw clenched. "She left a final directive," he said, sliding a tablet toward me. "Look." The screen showed a single file titled Crimson Continuum. The officer of rules had created an automated relay that would trigger if her presidency was revoked. Inside the file was a list of resident data: addresses, payment histories, private emails, even medical records. "She was going to dump everything," Henry said. "Full data leak, mass humiliation, a parting gift." "She wanted to burn the village to prove she ruled it," I muttered. We were still staring at the file when the front door creaked open. Linda Hayes stepped inside, pale but resolute. "The residents are gathering," she said quietly. "They want answers. Some are saying she was framed." I exhaled sharply. "Of course they are. Fear doesn't vanish overnight. It mutates." Outside, a crowd was already forming near the fountain, the same place my son once played, the same place the enforcer in crimson had delivered her last ultimatum. I could still hear her voice in the wind. Rules are what keep chaos civilized. But rules without humanity were just another form of violence. I stepped onto the stage where she once stood. Faces turned toward me, some angry, some hollow, most confused. "Last night," I began, "we all saw what control looks like when it stops protecting and starts punishing. Claudia didn't serve this community. She enslaved it through fear." Murmurs rippled. A few nodded. Others crossed their arms, still unsure. "She left one last act of vengeance," I continued. "A data leak that would expose your private lives to the world. But we stopped it, for now. That's why we're not rebuilding her system. We're replacing it." A man in the front row shouted, "So what now? We just move on?" I shook my head. "No, we rebuild accountability, not authority." As the crowd broke into restless debate, Henry leaned in. "The trigger's still armed," he whispered. "If anyone accesses that mainframe, even accidentally, the leak activates. And if we shut it down, failsafe detonates." The tyrant in heels thought of everything. I stared at the flickering terminal light, blinking like a heartbeat. For all her cruelty, her designs were meticulous. She'd engineered permanence through paranoia. "Can we redirect it?" I asked. Henry frowned. "To where?" "To her," I said. For the next hour, we worked in tense silence. I handled the physical circuit bypass while Henry rerouted the data stream. Every click, every keystroke carried the weight of years of grief and anger. When we were done, Henry's fingers hovered over the final command. If this works, every encrypted file in her network will copy directly to the state investigator's mainframe. And if it doesn't? He glanced at me. Then Silver Pines goes dark forever. Do it. The system hummed, screen flashing red, then white. Streams of data flooded the display. Her voice memos, board records, internal messages. Every violation she'd ever falsified. For a moment, I almost pitied her. The board chair who thought she could legislate morality, but drowned in her own obsession with order. Then the screen went black. Silence. Henry turned to me, eyes wide. Transfer complete. Outside, a faint breeze rustled through the empty HOA flags. The crowd had dispersed, leaving only the sound of sprinklers and bird song. But peace still felt unnatural. I knew better than to mistake quiet for closure. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. A text. You finally understand, Sheriff. Order isn't destroyed, it's inherited. I froze. No signature, but I didn't need one. Only one person spoke like that. The clipboard queen might have lost her title, but her ideology was contagious, and someone, somewhere, had already caught it. Henry's voice pulled me back. We did it, Mark. It's over. I stared at the horizon, where dawn was breaking through the fog. No, I said softly. It's only just begun. Because justice doesn't end when a tyrant falls. It begins when people stop letting new ones rise. And in Silver Pines, shadows had a way of learning names. The town hall overflowed before sunset. The air dense with unease, camera crews jammed against the walls, and residents crowding shoulder to shoulder. For the first time, Silver Pines wasn't gathering under Claudia Mercer's command. They were gathering to bury her legacy. But power never dies. Quietly. The clipboard queen might have been confined to a holding facility 2 counties over, yet her name still divided the room like a fault line. On one side stood the neighbors who feared her return. On the other, those still loyal, convinced the system only failed because she'd been removed. I stood at the center aisle, next to Henry, staring at the empty podium where she once ruled every meeting. They're restless, he muttered. They're leaderless, I replied. That's when ghosts speak loudest. As if on cue, the overhead projector flickered. A burst of static, then an image. The enforcer in crimson, live from her detention cell, framed in flawless lighting as if she'd staged it herself. Good evening, residents of Silver Pines, she began. The room froze. Her voice, calm and surgical, carried across the speakers with unnerving composure. I may not be there in person, but leadership doesn't require presence, only conviction. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Someone shouted, "She's hacking us again!" I grabbed the mic. "Claudia, this ends tonight." She smiled faintly. "You don't get to decide that, Sheriff Donovan. The truth is, order collapses without authority. And when your neighbors realize that, they'll come crawling back to the only one who gave them peace." Her arrogance was deliberate, a psychological performance. The tyrant in heels was orchestrating her own resurrection through fear. Henry whispered, "She's streaming from an external relay. She must have hardwired a pre-scheduled feed through the HOA's legacy system. Can you cut it?" He hesitated. "If I sever it wrong, the entire archive could wipe, all evidence included." I looked back at the screen. "She's betting I'll choose the data over silence." Claudia's voice sharpened. "You can't win both ways, Mark. Either you protect their memories or their comfort, but not both." That was her brilliance, her cruelty wrapped in logic. "Play her game," Henry murmured. I nodded slowly. "No," I said aloud, eyes fixed on her face. "Let everyone see who you really are." I turned the mic outward toward the crowd. "You hear that? She's not protecting you. She's weaponizing you. Every fear, every fine, every rule. It was never about community. It was about control." Her smirk faltered. "You're grandstanding." "No," I said evenly. "I'm teaching." I gestured toward the screen. "This is what tyranny looks like when it smiles." Gasps rippled through the hall as Henry projected her hidden files, the same ones we recovered from the Crimson Continuum. The walls lit up with violation photos, falsified notices, and private conversations she'd intercepted. Each slide was a confession. Each name, a neighbor she'd manipulated. "You invaded their homes," I said, voice rising. "You recorded their children, fined their grief, and called it management. You built an empire of obedience. But it's over." The officer of rules leaned forward, mask cracking. "You self-righteous fool. Without rules, people destroy themselves." I stared back at her, unblinking. Without empathy, rules destroy everyone else. For a heartbeat, silence consumed the hall. Then the projector glitched again, the signal collapsing into static. Her image flickered, her voice breaking apart mid-sentence. "You think this ends me? You're—" The feed died. The room erupted into noise, half cheering, half panicked whispers. Henry let out a long exhale. "Signal terminated. She's gone." I wasn't so sure. As I turned to face the crowd, I caught Linda Hayes near the back, trembling, her expression unreadable. When our eyes met, she mouthed something I barely caught. She contacted me. My stomach dropped. I stepped off the stage and approached her quietly. "When?" "Last night," she whispered. "Through a message app. Said she had evidence. Proof that someone higher authorized her actions. Someone outside the HOA." I froze. "Who?" Before she could answer, the lights dimmed. A power surge rippled through the building. Henry's laptop blinked with a single new message across the screen. "You exposed the pawn. Now find the queen." The crowd began murmuring again, fear rekindling like dry kindling catching a spark. Henry looked at me. "She's not acting alone." "No," I said quietly. "She never was." I turned back toward the podium, staring at the flickering lights that once crowned her authority. The board chair might have been confined, but her ideology had roots, deep, spreading, and still feeding on control. Tonight wasn't victory, it was revelation. The storm wasn't over, it had just changed its shape. And as the crowd began to disperse, I knew one thing for certain. Before this was done, every hidden name behind her throne would surface. Because Claudia Mercer wasn't the end of the story. She was the warning. Morning sunlight spilled through the cracked blinds, painting long bars of gold across my desk. Silver Pines was quiet again. But it was the kind of quiet that follows a storm, when everything still trembles underneath the calm. The news anchors were already replaying last night's broadcast. Every major outlet carried the same headline: Claudia Mercer, the fall of a modern-day HOA monarch. The clipboard queen had finally been dethroned, her influence scattered like ashes in the wind. But I couldn't celebrate. Not yet. Because even as the cameras moved on, the wounds she left behind still bled through the neighborhood. Broken friendships, lawsuits, fear that the system she built might one day reboot itself under another name. Linda Hayes stood at my doorway, clutching a folded document. "Governor's office issued a public audit," she said. "Every HOA in the state, full transparency review." I nodded. "It's a start." She hesitated. "There's something else. The message she sent me before the blackout." I looked up. Linda swallowed hard. It mentioned a second account, offshore. She said, "If you think I built this alone, follow the money." The words hit like a pulse of electricity. The officer of rules had always been meticulous, too meticulous to act without backing. Someone financed her empire of control, and that meant the real architects were still hidden. Henry entered a moment later, laptop in hand. "I tracked the data trails from the Crimson Continuum," he said. "One lead goes to a consultancy firm, registered in Nevada. Guess who sits on their board?" I raised a brow. "Who?" He turned the screen toward me. The image made my stomach knot. It was the same man who'd publicly condemned her, the regional HOA Federation director. "She was protecting them," Henry said. "Everything she did here was a pilot program. We were the test site." I leaned back, the weight of it pressing down. And now the test is over. For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of a sprinkler sputtering outside filled the silence. "She wasn't just a tyrant in heels," I said finally. "She was an instrument." Linda's voice broke softly. "Then what happens now?" I stared out the window. "Now we finish what she started, but the right way." The camera crews returned at noon. Reporters lined up outside the old clubhouse, now stripped of its banners and plaques. They wanted a statement, closure, something definitive. I stepped out beneath the sun, the same courtyard where the enforcer in crimson once delivered her verdicts. The air smelled different now, clean, like the first breath after rain. "Sheriff Donovan," a reporter called out. "What's next for Silver Pines?" I paused. "We rebuild, but not from fear, from trust. Claudia taught us what happens when control replaces compassion. That ends today." Flashes erupted, microphones extended forward. "And what about her?" someone asked. "What happens to Claudia Mercer?" I looked toward the detention van parked by the curb. Through the tinted glass, I saw a faint outline, her figure still upright, still composed. Even now, the board chair wore defiance like armor. "She'll face trial," I said quietly. "But justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention." As the van door slammed shut, a strange mix of pity and rage twisted inside me. She believed in order, truly believed it. Even if it meant burying humanity beneath structure, that was her tragedy. Henry approached, voice low. "You think she'll talk?" "She'll talk," I said, "because she hates being forgotten more than being caught." We watched the convoy disappear beyond the gates, the same gates she once ordered sealed in the name of protocol. For the first time in months, the breeze passed through freely. Linda exhaled. "Feels like it's over." I shook my head. "It's never over, Linda. Every system built on silence leaves echoes. It's our job to make sure no one listens to them again." She smiled faintly. "You sound like him." I looked toward the empty porch across the street, my father's chair still there, worn and waiting. He'd tell me justice isn't about winning, it's about remembering. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the cul-de-sac, neighbors reopening windows, dogs barking again, the rhythm of life returning. For the first time, the shadows didn't feel like threats, just reminders. I turned back to the camera crew one last time. "If you've ever been silenced by someone in power," I said, voice steady, "remember this. Authority doesn't make you right, and fear doesn't make them stronger." The microphone lights blinked red, capturing every word. If you believe homeowners deserve justice, subscribe now. Share your story in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Because every neighborhood deserves a voice. The final shot caught the flagpole outside the clubhouse. Bent, rusted, but still standing. Beneath it, the reflection of the clipboard queen lingered for a moment in the glass door before fading into sunlight. And for the first time, Silver Pines felt free.